Hey guys, Shane McMurray from The Wedding Report. In this episode, I meet with Karrie, who is a professional photographer located in Key West, Florida. Check it out. Karrie, thanks for doing this. Appreciate you. And so tell me about your business. Tell me what city you're in, your website, your Instagram, all that good stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Karrie Porter Bond. I run Karrie Porter Photography. I'm based in Key West, Florida. So tropical destination in the middle of, well, the first day of February. It's a balmy 77 degrees.
It's horrible.
So I do primarily destination weddings. But so I say that, and then a lot of times people go, oh, you travel all over the world. And, no, I actually live in the destination. And so couples come here to Key West to get married. We're actually the #2 location for destination weddings in the United States, second only to Las Vegas. So we do a lot of elopements. We see a lot of midday weddings, things like that. And as far as, website, Instagram, I'm kporterphotography.com online and kporterphoto on all the socials.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you talked about your destination and people come in. How do you interact with people that are remote, right? And they're wanting to come into that area. Do you do a lot of like video interviews, or unless they're travel in and then do some stuff and then meet you and then come back later? How's all that working?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So Key West is the third major market that I've been in. I've been a photographer since 2001, and the other 2 locations I was in were very locally based. So it was very much, you do a great job, you get referrals, and those referrals beget referrals. And then I moved to Key West, and all of that kind of goes out the window. You're very much, like you said, you're working with people who are hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. We have people come from all over the world. And so it's very, a lot of, phone, email, obviously, and a little bit of, I have some couples who do want to hop on like a Skype call or something, and we'll do that. Some people I honestly don't ever meet face to face until the day of the wedding. It's kind of a running joke because like you walk in on the wedding day and you're like, which one's the bride? Because I've never a lot of times met them in person.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was really different for me, getting used to that, because you're so, especially in the photography side of things, because it's such a personal relationship that you have with your clients and stuff. And so you just kind of, you find, for me, you just find a new normal and you find ways of working around it. And, a lot of times people will come into town, especially if it's a bigger wedding, if they're bringing 150, 200 people, then they're more than likely going to be visiting at some point in the planning stages. And that's when we'll sit down and meet. If they're not doing that, then I do try to get them in the studio like the week that they arrive, if I can. Sometimes that's not even possible though. So it just really depends on the client. I have some people who I barely even speak to them. They sign the contract from Michigan, and then I show, we have minimal email on leading up to it. And then I walk in on the day of and I barely have ever talked to them. And then I have other people who I have some brides who I talk to once a week. So it just really depends on their comfort level and how much they feel like they need that one-on-one.
Yeah. So I got to imagine the lead time is sometimes short on some destination weddings then?
It can be. The shortest shortest lead time I ever had was about 12 hours.
Wow.
I had some people driving down and they were like, we're coming to elope. We need some photos for like an hour on the beach. And I did them. Yeah. But usually, it's your typical 6 to 8 to 12 months out. Usually the bigger weddings, the further out that they are.
Yeah. So since it's a destination place, I got to imagine the weddings are usually smaller, right? More intimate.
Yeah, definitely a lot more intimate. A big wedding for us is 80 to 100 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because people will call and they'll say, I'm just having a really super small wedding, like 120 people. I'm like, that's huge for here. Like I know in the real world, like that's small. But yeah, I I very rarely do weddings with over maybe 40 or 50 people.
Yeah.
Usually it's 20 to 30 guests, not a huge group.
Yeah, that makes sense. That
Mhm.
makes sense. So what goes into, um, after you get the couple, do you have any planning work that you need to do with them prior to actually the wedding day? I know
Yeah.
sometimes you can't when when the lead time's short, but the ones that you do have time with, what goes into that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a couple of things. Probably the first and most difficult, or not difficult, but just the most challenging in terms of logistics is the timeline. So we work really hard to make sure that everything that the couple wants is accounted for in the timeline. One of the mistakes I made early on. Here comes someone. Sorry.
No worries.
One of the one of the mistakes I made kind of early on was, not spending enough time, figuring out how much time each thing was going to take. And so a couple might say offhandedly, like, oh, we want to go down and, take a photo by Sloppy Joe's. Well, it's like, oh, well, maybe that'll only take 5 minutes. But it's like, no, we have to walk to the car. We have to get in the car. We have to drive to the thing. We have to get out.
Yeah.
We have to, there's a lot that goes into it. So for me, the biggest thing I work on is that photography timeline with the couple. And I start by giving them a questionnaire. I ask them, how many bridal party, how many family members, who's going to be important in those kind of formal groupings. We also talk about any locations in Key West because the majority of couples who get married in Key West have usually been here before, not always, but very, very often. So a
Mhm.
lot of times they'll be, maybe it's like a cool spot that they, watch the sunset, or they have a perfect, their favorite bar that they
Yeah.
love to go to. So I always ask them, like, are there any kind of locations that are important to you in that respect?
Yeah, that
Yep.
makes sense.
So,
Yeah.
yep. So
Yeah.
I work on that, and other little things like just making sure family members that want or need to be in the photos, like make sure they know where to be and when, and
Mhm.
all that jive.
Yeah, yeah, totally. All right, so after you get through all of that and you get to the wedding day, how many hours do you think are you spending at a wedding day typically? And then kind of tell me about your day, what goes into that?
Yeah, so for the day itself, I'm generally starting my day a couple hours before with, gear and batteries and SD cards, and, just kind of
Yeah,
making sure I'm ready for everything. And then I try to be to the venue about 30 to 45 minutes before I'm going to start. And then, so if I'm starting, say, at noon, I'll have gotten there at about 11:15, 11:30. And again, just depending on what the venue is, if I've ever shot there before. Most places, because Key West is so small, most of the
yeah,
time I've been there before. But
yeah,
or if it's somewhere I haven't been in a while, I like to get there early.
sure.
But yeah, and so then I'm usually shooting anywhere from 4 to 6 hours, sometimes a little longer, 7, 8 hours. It's rare for us to go over 8 hours. And then after that, driving home, downloading cards, putting all the gear away, cleaning everything,
Hmm.
and then the process begins. That's where a lot of the brunt of the work starts, with all the editing and all the post-production stuff.
Yeah, so how much time do you think you put into the editing part?
um so probably I usually estimate for every hour shot about 3 to 4 hours of just behind the scenes, and that may include emails back and forth with the client too.
Yeah,
I also have someone who helps me. I have two people actually who help me edit, so I can split up my time a little bit, and,
that's
and
nice.
focus more on shooting. And so yeah, so all told, between all of us, probably a solid 3 to 4 hours for every hour photographed.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So you have a team of people that help you at the event as well, or?
Yeah, so I have one assistant who just comes and helps with lighting and gear and make sure I don't leave lenses behind,
Yeah,
things like that.
yeah,
Um, and then I have a second shooter. I have two to three people that I use for second shooters who are also photographers, and we sometimes will second shoot for each other. So a lot of times that's for a bigger wedding. If I really need that backup
yeah.
help, then we'll have a second person. But I always have somebody with me. I at least always have an assistant,
Mhm.
and my assistant can shoot. So if I do need, like, let's say we're in the church, which we don't do a lot of church weddings, but let's say we do a church wedding and we don't want to move around a lot, I'll have them get another angle so that I'm not disrupting the ceremony and things like that.
Gotcha.
And then behind the scenes, I have 2 editors and 2 retouchers, and they're freelance, but I keep them pretty busy.
Yeah.
So, basically, once I get everything downloaded, they go on to, we have a server that all of us have access to, and they access the photos and they kind of do the later edits before they come back to me. And then I look through them. And then I usually put kind of my final stamp on it before they go to the client.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Do you do video at all?
Minimal, very little. I'm actually videoing tonight, so it's funny you asked that. But yeah, I try to really focus on stills. I do have one of my second shooters that I've worked with a lot. He shoots video for his own business, and
Uh-huh.
so we have worked it out where, if I have a client who wants video as well, we'll shoot together. And it's more of like a simple video. But if somebody wants like a full video production and multiple cameras, and they want a really snazzy wedding film, then I refer them out to a dedicated videographer for that.
Yeah. Do you find that couples ask for that quite a bit, or?
Not very often. Maybe 20% of my couples will ask about video, and I would say out of those, we maybe do photo and video for 3 or 4 a year. Not a ton,
Yeah.
because the majority of them, and I obviously show them like what we can do, just like a simple video of the ceremony and just a little bit throughout the day.
Yeah.
And then in comparison to what the guys do that have like crews of 2 and 3 people with the sliders and all the stuff,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
Yeah.
if that's what you're looking for, hire them. Like that's what
Yeah,
they're
right.
they're good
Ha-
at. Yeah.
Have you shown up and then they have the video crew there, or do you already know if that's going to happen ahead of time?
Yeah, we always know ahead of time. That's never a surprise.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's never like we show up and they're like, oh, by the way, can you shoot some video too? It's like, it doesn't really work that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So for destination weddings, do you find that people are interested in maybe live streaming their wedding, or are the guests doing it for them, or are they even asking for something like that?
That's a good question. I mean, I've had clients who will put on like a Facebook Live just themselves, and have Aunt Susan hold the camera or something like that.
Gotcha.
But no, that's not really something that I don't know that I've ever been asked that. Actually, that's a good question.
Yeah, I was just curious if it's, because social live is becoming more popular. So I was just curious if the couples you're seeing, particularly for like destination weddings, because they're traveling somewhere and they're probably away from certain family members. I'm sure the core close families there and friends, but just curious.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and yeah, they usually, the ones that I can recall, like think of off the top of my head, they just sort of did it very low key. They just had one of the
yeah,
family members hold the
that
phone
makes
or
sense,
something.
right? You're already friends with everybody on Facebook, so just Facebook Live it, and it's easy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So what advice specifically would you give couples that are looking for photography, particularly if they're traveling for a destination wedding?
um Advice for couples. So I guess the first thing would be, because it's destination, you're working with somebody you're not close to, you've never heard of. And so the first thing is to make sure like you find somebody that has amazing reviews, that your vendors all know. If you start asking around and you're like, oh, I'm working with whoever, Bob Smith Photography, and people are like giving you that face. Or the other thing is if you're saying a name and people are going, okay, like that's not a good reaction.
Yeah, totally.
So if you say the name of any vendor that you're working with in a destination and the person's not like, oh, Sarah, I love her, she's amazing, like if you're not getting that response in a small town community, then I would definitely be wary.
That's good advice, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of times people will say, they'll say a name, and if I don't know the person, I definitely will say I don't know them. But if it's someone that I know, but maybe I just know
Yeah.
maybe doesn't have the best reputation, I'm not going to be like, oh, they're horrible.
Right.
But I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Especially
Totally.
if they've already booked with them, because you don't want to be like raining on their parade or anything. But
Of course.
and I'm
Yeah.
not a planner. Planners, that's their job. Like let them get in the middle of all that. But yeah, so find someone, good reviews that your other vendors that you're working with know and like and trust. And the other big thing, especially with photography, is finding a style that is close to what you want. That has happened to me where somebody has just sort of booked me based on price or availability or whatever. And then, it's never been horrible, but there have been conversations later where it's like, oh, I thought I was going to get, you know, this kind of look or this kind of photo. And it's like, well, I mean, did you look at my website? Like,
Yeah,
none of my
right.
images are like that. And that's not to say that you can't obviously accommodate someone for a special request, but you definitely want to, photographer style is like part of them. It's funny, we have this conversation among fellow photographers that are friends of mine, and like I'll second shoot with them and they'll second shoot with me, and you try to like kind of replicate their style a little bit,
Yep.
but it still comes out looking like yours. I have a really good friend, Rachel, who I work with a lot, and she'll be editing and we'll be texting and she's like, oh, I can completely tell that these are your images because they come out of me that way. So definitely look at style. If you're kind of a quiet, more somber type of person, maybe you don't want a photographer who has bright and colorful and punchy images, and vice versa. If you love to goof off and be silly and jump in the air and run around with balloons on the beach or whatever, like you probably don't want a dark and moody, somber style of photography. So definitely make sure that's a fit. That would be my other really big advice.
Yeah, that's actually really good. Yeah. So let's flip gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the business side. And
Yeah.
what would you say for you is working well right now today in business?
Um, Working well for me, I had a little bit of a not rebranding, but I redid my website and I kind of just redid everything about 2 years ago. And it was one of those things where what I had before was what I thought everyone wanted.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I had done. And then finally I was like, I hate this. Like, I don't like the way this looks. Like, it doesn't feel like me. And so I redid everything and really put a lot of my own personality and energy into it. And now I get so many compliments and conversations about like, oh my gosh, like reading your website and then meeting you in person, it's like the exact same thing. I've had a couple people tell me that since I launched that
That's
new
great.
site about 2 years ago. And I didn't do that intentionally thinking like, oh, I want couples to say this, but it was interesting to get that feedback. And I started really blogging a lot more, and not blogging like what I was shooting, which I do that as well, but really putting a lot of time and energy into that client education because of the trust factor that goes into a destination
Yeah.
relationship. I really want my couples to feel like I've got their back. I'm thinking about all the things they're worrying about. I have an answer for them. So I try to at least twice a month put out something on my blog that is like, how to pose, what to think about when you're doing XYZ, location ideas, all that kind of stuff that I take for granted because I do it every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
And so I've put a lot of time into that. And interestingly enough, I had a lady call me a couple of days ago. She had asked me a question in an email, and I had an article or a blog post that I had written. And so I responded and I said, oh, and I answered her question, but I said, I go into more detail here if you want to check this out. She actually called me on the phone, and this was so bizarre. Like, it was crazy. She said, I actually got a lower quote from the guy down the road. She goes, but I just loved like your information. And after I read that blog post, I read a couple more, and like, I love you. And like, even though it's more expensive, like I'm booking you. And I was
Yeah.
like,
That's
yay,
awesome.
all that time and effort like went for something. So
Yeah.
that's what's really working for me is like, just focusing on like being as much of a resource to couples as possible, and not really, just being super authentic to what I
Yeah.
love, and, making it very much my personality and energy and stuff like that.
Let's go back for a minute because you said something that was very interesting, I think, and that is a lot of times we think we need to redo our website or redo something, and we either get advice from outside, we do it, and then we go back and we look at it and we go, yeah, you know what, this isn't really me. This isn't what I'm about. This doesn't make sense to me. Like it
Hmm.
doesn't solve some of the problems you're trying to solve. How did you get to that in yourself? Like, because that's kind of the struggle. You think, okay, maybe you hired a consultant to help you and say, hey, what do I need to do? because we all, I mean, a small business, I do this. I go out and look for coaches or people that can help me kind of make myself better, or what can I do to make my business better? And maybe we take that advice and we go that direction. But how did you get to that space where you're like, yeah, I don't know.
Um, you know, I wish I could say I had like this brilliant consultant that I can, worked with. I do have a business coach, and that I talk to every 2 weeks who, if, not to change the subject completely, but for business people watching this,
Yeah,
if I give you any advice, like get a good coach and like talk to them often. But anyway,
I do
no,
too, by the way. I have a coach as well. So yes.
yeah, it's so useful. And anyway, so I think part of it, I'm trying to take myself back to that point. So part of it was I didn't really feel like I was getting the clients that I mean, they were good clients, and there was not that those clients weren't good, but it was just like, I don't know. And then I got a few that were just like totally my people. And I was like, how do I get more of these people? That's kind
Yeah.
of where it started, I think. And, and then I also was running into just some technical challenges with the old site. So things that I wanted to do, like Facebook advertising, you do like a Facebook pixel, like it didn't have that capability. So little technical things like that was, I think, the initial kind of kick in the rear to start working on it.
Mhm.
And then I just really just went with my gut and what I loved. And as it came together, and I did it all myself. So I don't know that that's for everybody, but for me, I just really enjoyed the process of kind of discovering what layouts I liked and switching out images, and
Yeah.
basically when it made me go like, like that's when I knew I kind of had something that I was really enjoying.
Yeah.
And I worked on it for a while. And then yeah, I just kind of like, I guess went with my gut is the best way
Mhm.
to say that. And obviously followed like your typical best practices and stuff like that. But I stopped looking at everyone else's websites. That was also the other thing is
Yeah.
my website doesn't even have I mean, it has a bride on the homepage, but it's not a typical wedding shot. Like my first image that pops up is a beautiful, colorful, like young girl, like laughing. You can tell she's just like having the best time. And then it goes to a wedding image. Like, so it's just like
Yeah.
everything that somebody in the wedding industry would probably tell you, like, oh, it's got to be this and it's got to be formatted that way. And I get that comment a lot. Like when we do kind of get into conversation, they'll be like, your site just looked completely different than everyone else's. And I'm like, I did that intentionally.
Yeah.
So yeah, so those are just a
Perfect.
couple of thoughts. And I will say another thing probably ties into the business coach. Not that she necessarily gave me information specifically about the website, but I think the confidence that comes from like kind of knowing who you are and what resonates with you and what you're trying to attract in the world, that's
Mhm.
definitely a skill set that I got from that relationship. So that
Yeah.
may have tied in some way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's fantastic. And as a photographer working in a very crowded space, you have to find ways to stand out. And I think by you like just being yourself on your website and doing what you do on your website is that little bit of differentiator that makes you stand out, right? Like just like you said,
Hmm.
those customers came to you and she booked you because she read your blog post and that really resonated with her. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was so cool. Yeah, that
And it
was really
took you a while to get there, though. It's not like it happened overnight, right? It's this was
no.
over a 2-year period where you're like, now you're starting to see the fruits of that all of that work, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I always look at my stats, for what posts get looked at and things like that. And there are some articles that I worked really, really hard on that hardly ever get any views. And then other ones that I just like
Yeah,
threw up there, quickly. And so yeah, it was just, and that's the first time that's like someone's verbatim said like, I'm hiring you because this,
that's pretty cool.
for the blog specifically. But I just thought that was really cool. Yeah, so the confidence tying in and just really going with something different, that was really a big thing. Yeah, so
Awesome.
I'm really
Yeah.
happy, and it's a work in progress. I keep working on it all the
It
time.
always is. It
Yeah,
always is, right? It's always a work
yeah.
in progress. All right, so let's change a little bit and talk about what's not working so well for you. And it could be anything like logistics, it could be editing, all the stuff that, there's so many things to do in business, but what are the things that are your biggest challenges right now, I think?
Hmm. Let me think. So I think one of the things I'm personally like I run into as sort of a challenge is like how do I say this? Like how to convey to clients the level of effort and love and like just really wanting to do a really good job for them, but that doesn't happen in 3 days kind of thing.
Mhm.
And obviously I have a contract and I tell them what the turnaround time will be and all of those things, but they forget and they're excited to see their stuff and all that. So one of the things I feel like I need to work on for this year is coming up with a better system for, relaying the information of like, here's kind of where we're at, this is how much work we have left. Like, this is kind of why it's been 4 weeks and we don't have it ready yet. Cause we're not sitting here eating Twinkies. Like we're legit like making it wonderful for you.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know that I really have figured out how to convey that without being like, oh, it's going to be amazing. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
so that's something. So I get a lot of like, and again, I think part of it going back to the destination, because it's not like they can just pop in the studio and
True.
check in. Like they
Yeah.
have to call me or text me or email me, and that distance may give a little bit of extra anxiety. So I need to find a better way to manage the flow of like the behind, like after the shoot.
Yeah.
And that way they're feeling like in the loop, but without me adding a ton of extra steps to what I have to do, because like if I'm busy like updating everyone, I'm not busy working on it. So I don't know,
Right.
that's something I feel like I want to systemize a little bit better and work on.
Yeah, that's probably something that, I mean, that technology could help with, you would hope, right? Like just
Yeah.
keeping people informed of where you're at and your status. Do you give them anything like in the day after, the night of, just to say, hey, here's some of the shots from the thing, here's what we're working on. Do you do
If
that?
I can, not always, but and that's another thing is like there's some inconsistency with that because it's very much dependent on, if I've got kind of a full weekend and I've shot till midnight, like there's just no steam left for me
Yeah,
to like
sure.
do anything that night. And then some, if we're in the middle of busy season, like it may be 3 or 4 weeks before I can get any kind of sneak peek or anything out. Um, so currently, no, but I do want that to change because I want some way to, and maybe there's even, like you said, technology. I know that like with more modern cameras, I don't use this feature, but I know there's a way to like select like star images as you're shooting them. So maybe
Yeah,
that's something I need to start practicing. And like, if I know I've really got a great shot that would be a great sneak peek, maybe just starring it right then. Cause that's part of the challenge is like,
yeah,
you come home at the end of the night, you got 3,000 images to go through.
yeah.
Like, can you just send me 3 or 4? It's like, I have to look at 3,000 to send you 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So
There's two photographers that I interviewed recently. One of them he actually does a presentation at the event. I don't know how he finds the time to do it, but he somehow,
God bless him.
I know, right? Somehow puts this thing together and then he puts it on an iPad and he shares it around. And then
Yeah.
someone I interviewed yesterday said that the night of, and I don't know, again, I don't know how she does it, the night of or the day after, at least, she will send them 15 to 20 photos of a sneak peek just to show
Yeah.
them what happened. And again, she says
I
they
know
love it, but I'm
photographers.
like, oh my God, I mean, how do you do it?
I know, and I know photographers locally that do that, and I don't know if they're just doing it super late at night when they get home. I feel like I give 100 and 1,000,000% at the wedding. Like
Yeah,
when I get home, I'm done. Like, and I really try not to schedule myself back to back because the day after a wedding, like I feel like I've been hit by a truck.
I'm
So
sure. Yeah, I'm sure.
um yeah, so I don't know how they do that, but it is something I want to work towards and getting a quicker sneak peek of some kind out because I feel like that would just be a good service for my couples, and I do try to do it as quick as possible. But I mean, I'll literally have people email me or text me like 2 days later and they're like, is everything ready? And I'm like, no, very much not ready.
Yeah, I know. People, we get impatient as humans, right? It's just,
And I'm guilty of it too. We're in the middle of a renovation on a house we just bought, and so everything from like buying ceiling fans to flooring to cabinets, I'm like, want it now, you know,
Yeah.
like where are my cabinets? And like,
Yeah.
I knew when I bought them that it was going to be 6 to 8 weeks. Like I knew that going in. So I have been on the other side of it and I know what it feels
Yeah.
like. So I'm really trying to find ways to meet people in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. How's the area down there after the hurricane a couple of years ago? So you guys pretty much recovered it completely and
Yeah,
back
there's
to normal?
still some work still being done kind of on the middle keys. So the Florida Keys stretch about 120 miles for those
Right.
that don't know kind of the geography. And Key West is a tiny little 2 by 4 mile, you know, speck.
Yeah.
Key West really didn't get hit too hard. There was some, you know, businesses downtown that had some flooding, and they've long done and renovated.
That's good.
Um, yeah, I think the biggest hit was like some of the big venues had gone not under, but like had to be completely gutted and renovated,
Yeah.
and that took a while. But all of them, with the exception of one, I'm trying to think if I can think of any others, but there's one big venue that's kind of a luxury upscale venue that still has not reopened.
Wow.
And from my understanding that it's having to do, because I guess the work that they're doing now has to like conform to new codes and everything. So
Yeah.
and it's on a private island. So it's like you
Wow.
can only get to it by boat. So the logistics of getting that back online have been pretty challenging, but everything else was back up. You know, I would say the longest was about a year for some places, but the majority of places were back up and running within 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And
Good.
really, it's yeah, and I think more, and I think this is something that's important for people to understand who aren't in a destination market, is the perception is actually more of a challenge than the damage itself, because just the fact that I'm still getting this question, I get asked this a lot. Clients and stuff be like, "How's everything after the hurricane?" It's like we don't even think about that. I mean, we do, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like getting over the perception that, um,
The place
you
is
know,
in utter destruction, right? Everything is destroyed completely, right?
yeah. And the news doesn't really help with that.
Nope.
They'll show footage from Key Largo, which is 2.5 hours away, and then people are calling, going, "Should I cancel my bookings and stuff like that?" And you're like, "No, that's not even the same like area."
Yeah. Yeah. That's 100 miles away. What do you?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not going to affect you at all.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Well, good. So, what advice would you give other businesses that are coming? I mean, you and I are going to retire, but at some point, hopefully. And what advice would you give those coming up in the industry?
Oh my gosh. If I had to, if somebody called me right now and was like, "I'm starting in photography, what do I need to know?" I think the first thing is and I know this is so much easier said than done for me now looking back, but it's like, try not to compare yourself to other people. That is just like the death of creativity. It's so hard to have confidence in what you're doing and to really be proud of your own work when you're constantly looking at other people's Instagrams and Facebooks, and maybe they've learned a skill 6 or 8 months ahead of you, and a lot of people get discouraged and they think, "Oh my gosh, so and so is so amazing, I'll never be like that." And I remember doing that too, so I'm just as guilty.
Yeah.
And I still do that now, 18 years later. I've been a photographer since 2001, so almost 19 years. But it's sort of like, if you can just focus on what you love and focus on service, like focus on really just doing the best possible job for your clients, you will be successful. There's no way that you won't be. And to also, just kind of try to, going back to that conversation of like doing things the way that you think that other people think you should do them,
Yeah.
that is just, it'll get you by. And I was certainly sustainable in that sort of model, and working all the time, working a lot and staying busy, but I'm just in such a different flow and like a groove now, just doing what I love, working with people that I genuinely want to be with and work with. And it's just a totally different way of being that it's so hard to teach that. But I would just say, if people can avoid the constant comparison and
Yeah.
just focus on service and doing as good of a job with the skill set and the equipment that you have, focus on that and you will absolutely be successful.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's great advice. Thanks. So last question, what's your best or worst wedding story or business story, whatever you got?
Thinking of some doozies.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll say a bad one. I'm trying to think if it's been the worst one. Well, I'm gonna give you two kind of
Okay.
bad ones. One was a mistake on my part, and one was just like working with Crazy Town.
Okay.
So going back to like making sure you're a really good fit for your client, I had a client a couple of years ago who, despite my best efforts to send a questionnaire, email back and forth with them, send examples of locations we were going to be shooting. I mean, I really felt like I gave this person as much information on the front end of what to expect and what we would be doing that there's no way there would be any miscommunication, at least
Right.
in my view. And the day of the wedding, they asked me, can we shoot at this other location? And I said, absolutely, no problem. Well, they had only booked me for 2 hours, so we don't have a huge window of time. So I said, well, what we could do is, we can go there instead of going over here. Does that sound good? Yeah, that sounds great. Okay. So we go, we do it, we shoot. They wanted to like sit at the bar and drink at the bar, whatever, like
Yeah.
whatever they wanted to do, we did. We get done, everything's fine, send the pictures, and like a couple months go by. I'd sent her a sneak peek, and she said, oh, these look amazing, thank you so much. Send the full gallery, and I don't know what happened in between there, but all of a sudden she was so angry that we did not shoot in her quote unquote favorite place in Key West ever. And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, how could I have missed this? Like, and I went back through all the emails. I looked at
Right.
the questionnaire. I looked at the schedule. Like, what did I miss? I don't know what she's talking about. And so anyway, long story short, there was in her mind apparently this one dock by this one restaurant that was her magical place in Key West that somehow she never she never shared with me. And she was legitimately upset. I mean, I said, well, what if we try to like, when you guys if you come back into town, we'll do a quick reshoot there. I really didn't feel like I had missed the
Yeah.
mark, but I wanted to, make it right.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and that wasn't really going to work out. And so then we even went to like, well, what if we tried to do a little Photoshop magic? I'll go photograph that spot. We'll take another one of your portraits and we'll Photoshop it together. We tried it. She didn't like it. And it was just like, she just couldn't make her happy. And I finally just got to the point and I was like, I've literally tried everything that I can.
Yeah.
And it was legitimately like frustrating. Like that was a really bad experience. The other one that I'm thinking of was a mistake on my part. I mean, it was kind of a freak accident, but I had a section of family formals just disappear. I don't know if something happened on the card. I don't know,
Wow.
but we had done, and so it was a very specific window. So it wasn't like there were no, so it was easy for me to miss, I guess is my point. And so we had done it, we had delivered the photos, and they were like, oh, do you have the picture of so and so? You have a picture of so and so? And so I'm like, well, I surely do. And so I go back and I look, and anyway, in looking, there was a file in the raw images that had like, you could tell where it had corrupted when you tried to open it. It was like all green and pink and stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's like a section of like 12 images, like 12 groupings, I guess you'll say, more images, and they're just gone. The numbers like skip completely.
Oh,
And I
wow.
never caught it. I didn't see it happen the day of, and I was just beside myself. That I cried so hard. I
Oh,
was so upset because it was like, I can't believe this happened. B, I can't believe I didn't catch it. Like I had, like the couple had to see it before I noticed it. And so I was so embarrassed, and ended up like offering them a free shoot for their family. A lot of times people come back. So that, and then I gave them like a complimentary couple of products and stuff just to like, oh, it was like such a freak accident. But
yeah.
that was a bad one because, that is something I really should have caught. Like I should have known. And so now I have other ways. Like I now shoot with 2 cards. Like I do like a backup on site. I have my own server. Like I've changed so many things since that wedding.
Yeah.
Because it was it was bad, but it was like good in a sense that it did. And it was also, it wasn't like the whole wedding. It was just like a very specific step. But it was like family members who were really important to them that we didn't
Yeah,
have. So that was really crushing and painful, and I still
sure.
regret it to this day.
Yeah,
But yeah, so those are some bad ones.
I feel your pain when you were explaining that. Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's the worst.
yeah, yeah,
And that's the first time that had ever happened to me. So it was also just very like, you know, but
yeah.
I guess if you're in business long enough, you're going to
Well,
have
usually,
that.
like if you know, and like in software development, when something happens on a server or whatever, you don't know that always that those things are going to happen. So when they do happen, you go try to figure out what the root problem is if you can, and then try to prevent it from happening again because you don't want it to happen
Mhm.
again. So that's just,
Yeah.
when those things happen, you don't know. I mean, you don't always know everything that's going to happen. So when they do those, you're like, oh, what can I put in place to make sure this doesn't
Yeah.
happen to me ever again, right?
Yeah, and that was exactly what happened because and really the mistake was that was a wedding I did have a full second shooter the whole day, and like I said, I always have an assistant, and that I don't really during when we're doing family formals, I've changed it now, but at that point I always shot them by myself, so
Mhm.
I would shoot them and my assistant would hold the clipboard or whatever. Well, now I always make sure to shoot them with two different cameras, whether it's my two cameras or them shooting kind of a backup, because those are like you can't really get those groupings back together again once
Yeah,
they're done. So, and then I was shooting in that particular wedding, I shot that with one of my cameras that doesn't have a dual card slot and my other camera does. So now family formals and like all the stuff that like you just really can't replicate. I always shoot that on the camera that dual records because then I can, if one card was to fail, I have the other one like
yeah.
recording at the same time. So just little changes like that, and it wasn't like the end of the world, but for me it was. And
Oh,
in
of
the
course,
moment, it was
right?
like,
Yeah, because
ah,
you take pride in your work, and so those, yeah, absolutely, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah. Carrie, thanks so much for doing this. I
yeah.
really appreciate your time.
Thank you. That was fun. Thank you.
Okay, all right. See you later.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for checking out this episode. I hope that you found it helpful. Please share it with other people. Also, if you're getting married or you work in the wedding industry, I would love to interview and share your information with other people. Send me a text 520-399-8580 or shoot me an email at letschat@wedding.report.